Hey guys, welcome back to Madera Farms. Today I am making more dough. Today's Saturday, we have Sunday pickups tomorrow, so I'm going to take you through the process of making all the dough. I'm going to tell you all the things that I love to use, what I'm hoping to change. I have a few things in my Amazon cart and I will show you guys what those are, and I'm hoping to get those ordered this weekend and have them for our next video, because I think it's important that you see the difference of what I'm doing now and what I hope to change. I've been getting a lot of messages over on Instagram regarding how long it's taking me to bake all this bread, how I do it, all those things, and we're going to answer them in this video. So I'm just filling up my Berkey now with water. I fed my starter earlier today. I will show you guys. I have a few starters that I'm selling, so I have those going. But this is my starter and it is ready to use. So I fed this at like 9:30 and it's 1:20 right now, so she's ready to go. And that means that I will be able to start my bread as soon as this water gets filtered through the Berkey. I'll be able to start, and then it can sit all day until tonight, and I'll do my inclusions and we will be ready to go. The first thing that I suggest you getting if you're going to start a microbakery is some sort of water filtration system. I have a Berkey. I think this is the King Berkey. It's like 4.5 gallons if I'm not mistaken. I'll put everything in the description so you guys can grab it if you want. But some sort of water filtration system, that way you're not having to run to the store to grab water constantly. If you have a water filter on your fridge or any of the, I forget what the other ones are called that you like put in the fridge, those are great too. You just need something to filter your water. And I think it's best to just invest in a Berkey or something like that right up front, so that you're not running to the store every day to buy filtered water. So I am just filling her up, and then in about 10 minutes I'll be ready to start my dough. Another thing you're gonna have to have is some sort of vessel to keep your starter. It's gonna have to be large. It can be plastic, it can be glass, whatever you have. I do suggest that it's clear so that you can see through it. Obviously you wanna see if your starter is active, and something easy to clean. So one thing that I always tell people when they're thinking about a starter, what they need to put it in is, I always suggest either a wide mouth mason jar if it's going to be something little, like if you're just baking for yourself and you're only going to have a cup or so. Wide mouth mason jars are the best because the sides are easier to clean, because you have to think about when you're like pouring it out and stuff, all of that starter is going to settle up in here, and if you don't have a wide mouth mason jar, it's going to be hard to get in there and clean that out. I have this big glass container for my starter because the sides are pretty straight and it's easy to clean. If you get something that's more of like a bowl shape, that could be really hard to clean, and that could just honestly be annoying after a while. So those are a few things before we start our dough that I wanted to tell you that I think would be beneficial to grab if you're going to start a microbakery. It just makes life a little bit easier, and trust me, because I'm telling you these things because I have learned the hard way. So as soon as this water is ready, we're going to go ahead and start our dough. Next thing that I think would be really helpful, and I already mixed in my starter, so is one of these Danish dough hooks. These really mix in all the ingredients really well, and it makes it a lot easier than using a whisk. So these you can find on Amazon. Again, I'll link those at the bottom of the video, but they're super helpful to get all of your ingredients really mixed in. All right, I am just mixing flour in. So this is the deal. I have a new loaf, and it is a maple syrup loaf. And the only way I can get it to be really mapley is if I do them individually, and during the stretch and folds or my coil folds, I start putting the maple syrup in at that point, and I'll show you guys how I do that. So I have to start those separately in order to be able to do that, because all of these are going to be different inclusions, or they're going to be like an everything loaf where I can do that stuff later when I separate it, and it doesn't have to be done during my coil folds. So that's just why I have that. I also have to start a mini loaf. My husband's grandmother wants a mini loaf of the blueberry lemon, which has been a really good seller lately, but she just wants a little loaf because it's just her. She doesn't need a whole loaf, so I'm going to make that special for her in another bowl. So that's just the reason why I have so many things going right now. Usually during the week when I'm making orders for wholesale or retail, I just do them in these tubs, and it works out perfectly fine. So that's a thing that I would say, if you guys are going to start something like this, you want to have a couple different options in case some of your inclusions need to be made separately. It all depends on what you're doing and how you're going to get the result that you want. But I tested the maple syrup a few different ways, and that's the best way that I have come up to do it. I also, with maple syrup, I'll show you guys how I do that. When I bake it, I put it in the oven, and then when I take the lid off, I drizzle more maple syrup over top of it, and that way it gets like nice and sticky on top, and that's what I'm going for. It's really good for French toast or any sort of like breakfast thing that you want to make. The maple syrup is delicious. I actually really like it avocado toast because it gives it that like sweet, but then you can add the avocados and a little bit of like sea salt, and it gives it like the sweet and salty flavor, which I think is really good. I am just getting my dough ready. It's kind of shaggy right now, so I still need to add some flour, but I really want these videos to be like you're hanging out with me in my kitchen. Like if you're a friend and you're over while I'm baking, that's what I want. I want you guys to see what I'm doing and then kind of explain it as I go. It's not like super formal or anything like that, but I think it's just nice that you get to see what's happening. Let me show you what I got going on right now. So this is my dough right now. For me, this consistency is still too watery, so I'm going to put more flour in. One of my videos, I was talking about how I have been going on feel, and I got a few comments from people saying that you shouldn't do that because that's not giving consistency, and especially if you're just starting out, you won't know what it's supposed to feel like. And yes, of course, if you're just starting out, measure everything. Get really good at making a loaf so you know what it's supposed to feel like, you know what it's supposed to look like, and then you can go from there. I'm not saying that if you're brand new at making sourdough to just know what it feels like or anything like that. Like obviously you need to learn, but once you get to a point where you're feeling very confident in your dough, then try a couple with just going on feel and see how it turns out, and then go from there. That's what I did. So yeah, I don't encourage you to just go on feel right from the beginning. Make sure that you are measuring so that you're getting a consistent loaf, and your results are good. You never want to have a fail at the beginning. I don't think anybody would want to do that. So I'm going to add a little more flour. I like my dough to be a little more dry. That's just how I like it and how it turns out best for me. So again, do find something that you really like and what your customers really like. Go with that and then improve on that. So you can see it's getting a lot more dry, and this is the consistency that I'm going for. The important thing at this point is to make sure that everything is incorporated. So you want to scrape down all of the little nooks and crannies, getting all of the flour incorporated into your dough. You never want to leave a dry ingredient or a wet ingredient just sitting in your bin, because eventually this is going to expand and then it will just collect all of that in your dough and it won't get mixed in. It's never good to leave ingredients just on the side of your your container. And we're gonna try something a little bit different with this in the baking, so stay tuned because it's something I've never done before, but I've seen a few people do it and I'm very curious on how it'll turn out. So mix that flour in, make sure everything's mixed in. What I do is I tend to get it a little bit more into the middle. This is only 5 loaves here, so it's not taking up the entire container. When I'm doing my 9 to 10 loaves, it'll take up my entire container, so it's a little bit different. But I'm gonna kind of push this all to the middle here so that we can keep these sides as clean as possible. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Sourdough is not perfect. That's the joy of making it, is it is an artisanal bread. So be funky with it, have fun. That's the whole point of it. All right, so now I'm gonna let this sit for half an hour and then we'll add our salt into it. Now we're gonna work that mini loaf that I was talking about. My mini loaves are half of what my regular loaf is. So another great tool is mason jars. I use my mason jars all the time for measuring my water. We use them for selling starters. I use the wide ones for the starters, but any sort of mason jar, it has measurements on the side, and that's just really helpful to have in your house. And you can use mason jars for so many things. I don't have a ton left in here, but the good thing about this is no matter how much starter you really use, it will bulk back up quickly if you have a starter that is very active, which this one is. I've been selling parts of it for a while now, and I've gotten so many good results from other people, so I know that it is a very good starter. In fact, I sell my starters for $10, so this is all I have left in here, and this will bulk back up to what you saw at the beginning of the video by tomorrow. So that's really cool. But like I showed you earlier, this is a starter that I'm selling, and I just fed it, I don't know, a little bit earlier. It was down to here and it's already up to here, and this is perfect. So this person is going to be picking up tomorrow. And I sell my starters, I give them a little starter card, and this card says how to keep your starter happy, and it tells you exactly what to do to maintain your starter. And I think this is important because it reminds the customer that they are now responsible for this, and it gives them instructions they can refer to. They can put this on their fridge, and then they can keep their starter nice and happy. But I do suggest doing that. I also send it to them in an email, so if they lose it, they have it and they get a bread recipe. So it's not just $10 for that little jar of starter. That's also recipes included. So I think it's well worth it. I would definitely pay $10 for an active starter. If I've tried making starter before and have failed multiple times, because nothing's more frustrating than trying to make a starter and, you know, getting nowhere with it. So happy to help any way I can. If you are starting a starter from scratch and you have questions, feel free to send me a message. I tend to answer most of the comments within 24 hours. Sometimes YouTube is really weird about showing me the comments. I don't know if I'm just not seeing them, but I won't get them for like a day for some reason, which is strange. But if you follow us on Instagram at Madera Farms, I answer those. I get notifications on those, and I can answer those right away. Okay, so this was the mini loaf. So this was 3/4 cup water and a cup and a half of flour and about a half a cup of starter. I never measure my starter anymore. I used to be really anal about making sure I only put in a cup or half a cup of my starter. I started to love the taste of sourdough, and I figured I would try and add a little bit more in and see what happens. And no matter really how much starter I added, it all came out fine and it tastes great. So I just again, estimate it, and I know that I'm pretty close when I can just feel the consistency. Like I said earlier, that's something that you will get to if you're just starting out. Make sure to continue to measure until you get really comfortable with adding in your ingredients, because I don't want you to get stuck or fail or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that right now, but if you're wondering why I didn't measure that, that's why. We're gonna let this sit for a half an hour as well. I'm gonna get a damp tea towel, cover it, we'll let it sit, and then we'll come back, add salt to everything, and then we'll do some coil folds. Before we do that, we have to feed the starter. I always forget to mention this, but it's very important, obviously, to keep a healthy starter. Right now I'm feeding it 2 cups of warm filtered water and then 4 cups of unbleached bread flour. And then I just mix that in to make sure everything gets mixed in together. It's really important to scrape down the sides of your vessel, make sure everything is incorporated, and then I'll just set that on the counter. I'm gonna go ahead and add salt. I've been using pink Himalayan salt, and I really like it. I think it makes the bread have a little bit more of a salty flavor, not too much, but it just kicks it up a little bit. And I think the ingredients that you use are so important, especially when it comes to sourdough, because you can really taste all of the flavors in the dough. And I think the pink Himalayan salt is just perfect for sourdough. I always used to use just regular sea salt, but I just tried this and I'm loving it. So what I do here is I just really mix it in, and then I cover it and let it sit for another 30 minutes. We're gonna have to add salt to all of the dough. So I just do a tablespoon per loaf. So in the big tub, I put my 6 or 8, whatever I did, tablespoons in there. In this one, I just did the 1 tablespoon. And then for the mini loaf, I'll just do about a half, and I just mix that in really nice. And the good thing with the pink is that you can actually see it, so it helps you be able to see if it's mixed in well, and that's always great too, so you don't have a clump of salt somewhere in your dough. Now it's time to start the coil folds. I have been doing coil folds for a little over a month now, and honestly, I like it much better than the stretch and folds. I think it gives the dough a little bit more texture, and I've noticed that it starts to proof a lot quicker as well, because you're not so hard on the dough. So I just lift it up, fold it over on itself, turn my bin, do it again. I do it 4 times, and then I cover it for 30 minutes and then continue doing the coil folds. It's a little bit harder in the smaller dough. Honestly, the more dough you have, I feel like the easier it is to coil fold, but it's still totally doable if you're just doing 1 loaf or even a mini loaf. I was still able to coil fold. It's just a little bit harder. And you can see here the dough's already starting to form and it looks really nice. You'll see the difference when I do this one here. It just is kind of awkward, but it still works really well. And for some reason, this dough got really sticky. I think it's because it's warm out and my dough is just a little bit more damp than normal, but it's still going to turn out fine. No worries. I always see people doing their sourdough and their hands are completely clean, and that's because they add water to their hands, and half the time I just forget to do it, if I'm being honest. But if you add a little water to your hands, your dough will not stick to your hands. Now this is the maple syrup loaf. Here I am adding syrup as I am doing my coil folds. This is the second coil fold, and I just add in the maple syrup as I'm folding. You can see here it's making the dough a little bit more damp. I do add a little bit of flour at the next coil fold, but perfectly fine still. And then this is the blueberry lemon. So I am actually adding my ingredients here as I'm doing the coil fold because it's only a blueberry lemon. So if I'm doing 1 flavor in a bowl, then you can go ahead and add your inclusions or your syrups or whatever you're doing right into that bowl. My bigger loaves, those are going to be separated, or my bigger pan, these are going to be separated and inclusions will be added later, and you'll see all of that. But if I'm just having something in a bowl by itself, you can totally do it right then and there. So this is another set of the coil folds. As you can see, the dough is already looking really good. If you look closely, you can see there's already bubbles starting to form in the dough, which is exactly what we're looking for. And you can tell the dough is looking a lot better at this point. It's not as shaggy, and it's definitely looking a lot prettier. With sourdough, you just have to trust the process. Into baskets. I highly suggest getting them because they're just gonna make your life a whole lot easier. A couple other things that I think are really good tools if you're starting a microbakery is a bench scraper. So on Amazon, if you look up sourdough kits, sourdough proofing kits, you're typically gonna get some sort of LOM. That's the name of the scoring tools. So you'll see probably something like this. It has the razor on the end, a bench scraper, and some Banneton baskets. That's typically like your startup kit that you would get. Now these LOMs are nice. They're just your average one. However, if you are really going to get into scoring dough, I do suggest getting something that's easier to hold like this, okay? I have been using this for years, and I just change out the razor blade, and it's super easy. They usually come with like 50. It's super easy, but when you're trying to do really small, little intricate details, this is really hard to use. This is much easier to use for little details. This one I always use for anything that's an inclusion because I literally just do one expansion score and maybe a few little decorative scores, maybe. But my plain loaves, I always use this. And it's really important to make sure that your LOM is sharp. You do not want, I feel so weird saying LOM. My friend Megan and I were having a conversation and I'm like, it's a lame. And then we looked it up and it says the pronunciation is LOM, but I still feel so weird saying that. But you want to make sure that it's very sharp. So change out your blade often. Make sure to keep it clean. You can see this one has a little bit of dough on it. But you want to make sure they're really sharp because that way you're going to get that really nice cut when you do make your scoring. A couple other tools if you're doing a microbakery that I suggest getting is a kitchen scale. This thing is used and abused, but this helps so much with making sure that all of your loaves are the same and it's very consistent. I struggled for a few weeks with making sure that I was giving out consistent loaves. And when you make a bunch of loaves in one container, you dump your dough and then you have to figure out how much goes in each loaf, like how much. And at first I was just like kind of eyeballing it, and then I would get to the end and I would have either like a pretty small loaf or a pretty big loaf, and you learn as you go. I mean, it's never going to be perfect. I'm going to consistently be trying new things, but when you use a scale and you measure out how many pounds you want your loaves to be, then you can be consistent with that. I have not gotten to a spot where I know for sure that this is 2 pounds. I'm still really, really bad at that, if I'm being honest. I have to use my scale or else I'm going to be all over the place with the loaves. How much is a loaf? That depends on what you decide. Mine are 2 pounds, and that is without inclusions. So I have 2 pounds of dough per loaf. How I found that out is I just did a single loaf in a bowl like I'm doing here, just a plain loaf, and then I measured it before I did any inclusions or baked it or anything, and I got that number, and that's how I know what to do. So that's where I'm at. The only other thing is a Dutch oven, and I think I've talked about this before, but I will touch base with it. There are a few options for Dutch ovens, and my Dutch ovens are really used. This is an enamel Dutch oven. This is supposed to be white, like a beautiful white Dutch oven. And when you use it, it turns color. This isn't dirty. This is literally just from my oven. The heat makes it get all of this. You can see, like, you can't even get it off. I bought special soap to clean it, and it's just not my favorite thing. So the inside, it's really supposed to look pretty much like this. I don't love it. I was so excited to have this like beautiful white Dutch oven, and I'm really upset, honestly, because I don't have time to scrub this thing. It literally, like, the one day I scrubbed it, it took me, I think, like 30 minutes and it wasn't even back to normal. But you can have this. It works perfectly fine. A cast iron one, which I love, and I will only get cast iron going forward. The great thing about cast iron, especially these Lodge ones, is there's kind of, it's good and bad, okay? The good thing is it doesn't have a knob on the top, so I can fit more in my in my oven. So I actually have 2 more on order. So I'm going to be able to cook 4 loaves at one time. If I only got these with the knobs on the top, I would only be able to do 2. So, and I just love cast iron. I think it is so much better to cook with. It's easy. And the thing I like about these ones is you can actually use the top as a pan. And I've seen so many cool dishes with that. So personally, in my opinion, I would definitely go with cast iron over the, I think this is called enamel. These are both Lodge brand and they both cook really well. I don't like how this looks, obviously. And it's not dirty, like I said. And the cast iron, I think, is just going to hold up better over time. So those are all the tools that you should need when you're starting your microbakery. I have been looking into a specific bread oven. I have just not reached the point yet where I think I really need it. This has been working out okay for me for right now. So we are going to go ahead and do our last coil folds on all of our dough, and then I'll pick you guys back up in a little bit. I am actually going to go out and try and milk our sheep for the very first time. So I'll take you guys with me for that. I think it'll be cool for you guys to see that as well. That was my first time ever trying to milk sheep. That was interesting. She did great. I was not on my game. We didn't get very much, but that's okay. She has been with her baby. And honestly, I didn't want to separate them yet. This was just kind of a trial. One thing that you have to do with sheep, you should do it with any animal, but you have to do with sheep, is wash their udders because they have all that wool down there and they're closer to the ground. Her udders are pretty small, but I'm still gonna filter this. We've never had sheep milk. We just kind of jumped into this endeavor without knowing. I'm gonna filter this and then we're gonna cool it down and we'll try it on camera and we'll give you our honest opinion on what we think of this sheep's milk. I thought I had filters, but all I have are coffee filters and I don't think they would, well, they might work. We can try it. If not, I have this. I'm just gonna use this cloth actually because I don't know if those coffee filters will work. But let's see how this does. I need to order some filters. So I have this. Okay, I need like a legit setup for this because this is insane. But I didn't really even think about the milk part of it. I'm being honest. So let's see what happens here. If it filters through good. It's going. There's a ton of stuff in here. Because sheep are so, like ours we haven't sheared yet, it is pretty disgusting. So you have to filter it. Like, look at how dirty that is. Ooh. Yuck. That is super clean though. It smells really good. I'm gonna put it in the fridge and then we'll try it. Before I stick it in the fridge, which is kind of time sensitive, this was my first milk with her and we got, this is kind of just for my my sake, we got a half a cup from her first milk. And that was horrible, honestly. Like I was way out of my game. I was nervous that she was gonna start kicking, which she didn't. She did great. Our other her udders are huge. So I honestly think we're going to get like 2 gallons out of her a day, but this is pretty good for a start. And she's had her baby on her all day, so we're going to try it. Okay, we are going to jump into shaping our dough. And this honestly is probably 10:30 at night, and I am finally getting to it. We had a very busy day, so I just sped through this. Honestly, it's just folding the dough and getting it into the Banneton baskets. As you can see here, everything is already done on these loaves, and then I'm going to do a big dough dump with my large amount of dough, and I will separate that. I think it's really important that you make sure to measure out your dough if you're doing this much dough. I said earlier that you should have a kitchen scale, so I'm going to set up my scale. I'll put a bowl on it, and then I'm just going to measure out 2 pounds of dough, and then that is going to be each loaf. With inclusions, I think it's really important to make sure that you're layering your ingredients. You want your customer to be able to slice the bread and see blueberries all throughout, or whatever your ingredients are. But you want to make sure that your customer is getting those ingredients if they're paying for a specialty loaf. So I just do this with all of my loaves for the night, and then I'm going to go ahead and put them in the refrigerator to cold proof. Cold proofing can be anywhere from 3 to, honestly, a little over 24 hours. So I fell asleep pretty early last night after forming my dough, and my phone died. So I'm up first thing this morning, and I have one in the oven, and this is my next one. This is the blueberry, and I'm trying something new. I am putting 2 ice cubes on either side of the dough. I saw someone do this, and it made their dough look so golden brown and beautiful that I wanted to give it a try. So I already scored it, put the 2 ice cubes on. We're going to go ahead and put the lid on, and we're going to see how it turns out. So this is my cooling setup as of right now. I got these at Walmart. I actually think they're for drying dishes, but they're working really well, and they were only like a couple bucks. I have 2 racks here on the bottom that I just overlap, and then these are stackable, and they're really nice because they collapse and I can easily store them away when I don't need them. I wanted one of the really nice bamboo cooling racks, but it just takes up so much space and I don't really have that right now. So this is what I'm dealing with, and it works really well. I can fit 4, 4, and then 3. So I also have this one. If I need, I can clear it off and I can cool on that. But honestly, by the time these ones are starting to cool, I can bag them and just kind of rotate them. So it works really well for me. There's nothing better than smelling freshly baked bread come out of your oven. Every time I make bread, my husband and I are always just so excited because it makes the house smell so good and homey. Nothing is better. I promise you, if you start doing this, you're going to want to eat bread 24/7 because it just smells so stinking good. I'm going to go ahead and give you a few tips on scoring your bread. I'm actually doing it backwards here. I am supposed to do my expansion score last. However, when you do your expansion score, you want to make sure that your hand is pretty much level with your working surface. So you want to do it at a 45-degree angle, but kind of level with your surface, and that'll give you that nice ear that you want with your sourdough bread. Here, I'm doing it correctly. I'm going to go ahead and do my decorative scores first, and then I will do my expansion score last. This just makes sure that your decorative scores are staying together and they're not going to bust open when you go ahead and bake it. So as you can see, here's my expansion score right on the side, and that is going to give it that nice ear that we're always looking for when it comes to baking sourdough. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this in the oven for 45 minutes at 435 degrees. We are going to try the sheep's milk. Give it a try. Tastes good?
Yeah. Yeah, it tastes just like cow's milk, I feel like.
I feel like it has like a little bit of a earthy taste to it almost.
Earthy?
Yeah, kind of.
No, it doesn't. It's like sweet. Oh.
It's good.
I like it.
That's good. All right, we're going to start the maple syrup loaf. So as I told you before, I like to drizzle it on right before I'm about to bake it for the very last time. So I'm going to leave the lid off. And as you can see here, it turned out so good. It's nice and sticky, and it's hard to kind of see in this picture, but honestly, it looks beautiful. I started scoring my everything, and I'm loving how those look too. So as those loaves are cooking, I'm heading out to the barn now to check on our lambs. Our sheep. I'm not going to milk until this afternoon or evening. I'm just going to do once a day in the evening for now, just to kind of get her used to it, and then probably midweek I'll start separating. So letting that bread cook while we do the barn chores. Also gonna try and collect some eggs this morning. I hear everyone. They're ready for breakfast. All right. We just had a very eventful little time here. So I came out to the barn, and I had noticed that our ewe was bleeding from the backside. So I texted Andrew and I said, come out, she's about to have a baby. And not knowing to me that she had already birthed. So I came out and I came right up to her and I was looking at her, and she started eating, and I'm like, well, that's weird. So I was like looking around the barn, and I saw a little sheep in the corner, and I thought she had passed away. She just looked not very good. But as I went over to her, she was fine. So I text Andrew and I'm like, we had a baby, sent him a picture, he ran out. And so I am giving Mom her food, making sure she has water, all the things. And then Andrew came out and he was looking at the baby, and out in the field, not far from where Mom gave birth to the little one, she had birthed another baby and it did not make it. So she seems very, very sad right now. She has just been kind of staring at the wall, not really doing much. So I just feel horrible for her. She's loving up on her little one here, but you can tell she's just sad. And I don't blame her. Everything else, she seems, breaks my heart. She seems pretty good. She birthed the placenta no problem, and I don't know, everything else seems pretty good. So as of right now, I'm just kind of letting them bond, making sure that, you know, they're doing okay. But so sad. This stuff sucks. In the midst of all of this craziness, one of my customers came to pick up her bread, and we were out in the barn like dealing with what we had to deal with. And she had messaged me that she was here, so I like ran up, gave her bread, explained what was going on. Super, super sweet. So we've just been kind of juggling the chaos that has happened today. And that's farm life, you know. I post a lot on here about my MicroBakery and how that stuff's going, but in reality, we run a farm, and the farm honestly has to take precedence over anything else, especially when things like this are going on. So I'm just glad that she understood what was happening, and she was, you know, super sweet about it. So I have my last loaf in the oven. I'll take you guys in with me to package everything up, and then we'll wrap up this video. But I wanted to show you some cute little angles of our new little girl. No name yet. Feel free to comment her name in the description. Look at her. Oh, you're a good mama. Yeah, you are. So, if you're looking for something to bring in a little bit of extra income and you are on a homestead or a farm and you need something that's pretty flexible, I would highly encourage you to start a microbakery. It gives you the flexibility to be able to still work with your animals, to have your kids around, whatever you need to do, but you're also bringing in income. And everyone loves bread. I mean, who doesn't love a nice, fresh loaf of sourdough bread? I'm sure your community would embrace you and they would love having your homemade bread. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye, friends.